YouTube fandom community, Beach Boys fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we're here today to talk about the Beach Boys' fifth album, Shutdown, Part 2, released on Capitol Records March 2nd, 1964, the height of early Beatlemania in the US. At the time, this thing was rush released. It was something that basically, the Beach Boys were on a record label, and at that point in time, you had to put out a certain amount of albums, a certain amount of singles, tour, do radio. You were constantly shown the way of what to do. But during all this time, with most other groups or bands or artists, they'd be given the material to record and then just kind of go in the studio, sing a few songs for a few hours, and be done. Brian and the guys, and particularly Brian, was really trying to write all the music and produce the album and do all the work and just be behind the scenes and not go on tour as much and just stay home and write music. So, he was working a lot. He was working overtime getting this stuff done, and he was pretty unhappy with the results of this album. And at the end of it, when it finally came out, this thing came out like 10 days after it was recorded. After the final mixings were done, this thing was out on the shelves within 10 days. At the time, he was pretty upset with how it came out. He felt it was rushed, it was hastily recorded. He felt there was too much filler on it, too much talking bits, too much instrumentals, and he really wanted to prove to the world after this that he could do a better job. On top of that, the Beatles happened. You know, in January 1964, when they started recording this album, on January 1st, they started doing Fun, Fun, Fun and Why Do Fools Fall in Love. They were pretty much on top of the world still. And then February happened, and the Beatles came, and they were on Ed Sullivan, and then all of a sudden they had, whatever it was, 10 songs in the top 10 or whatever, 5 songs in the top 10. They were on top of the world, and all of a sudden Brian was like, whoa, hold on, what are we going to do here? Even Carl's got pictures of these guys on his bedroom wall. What are we going to do? Because they had been on top of the game. They were the biggest band in America at that point. And so when this thing came out, it was kind of like, it hit number 13. It wasn't a top 10 album. It did go gold by 1966. The singles on this thing were bigger than the album itself. Fun, 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 Why Do Fools Fall in Love, The Warmth of the Sun, Don't Worry Baby. There's some absolute smash classics on this thing, but the album overall, Brian actually did want to start over again. He was like, you know what, screw it, let's just start over again. Capitol was like, nope, we're putting this out. We're going to call it Shutdown Volume 2, because that makes sense, because a lot of people apparently bought this thing, Shutdown, not called Volume 1, it's called Shutdown. In July of 63, this was put out in mono and stereo. This is a duophonic copy. That one's a mono copy, in much better shape, actually. I've only ever found this album in absolute beat-up condition. I've never seen this album in good shape. But it's got 409 and Shutdown on here, then a bunch of other bands like the Superstocks and Robert Mitchum, the classic 409 Hot Rod singer, Robert Mitchum. The Piltdown Men, the Cheers, the Eligibles. They just kind of threw some bands together, apparently. Listen to Shutdown, you can almost smell the rubber burn. So that's what happened. So Shutdown Volume 1 came out in July of 63, and then Capitol was like, let's just call it Shutdown Volume 2. Stupid. There is a song on here called Shutdown Volume 2, or Part 2, but it's just a really small, quick, instrumental thing. They could have called it Fun, 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 which they eventually did years later when it was reissued. They just wiped all this off and just wrote Fun, Fun, Fun in big purple text. Even calling it This Car of Mine or In the Parking Lot would have been a cool title. And they marketed this thing as a car hot rod album, but there's only 4 or 5 songs that mention cars at all. And a couple of these things aren't even really songs, so you can't call it a car album. Granted, the cover is absolutely a classic. You got Dennis's Corvette Stingray and the Grand Prix that Carl had next to him. And the cover design, I think, is really nice. It's cool to see them in all their matching blue jackets. They got their fancy cars. I like the layout. I think that's pretty cool. Someone named Bonnie owned this album back in the day and took very good care of it. So thank you, Bonnie, whoever you were or are. But yeah, this came out at a time when the Beach Boys were really starting to blow up in '64, at the early start of the year. David had left the group by this point, and there's some questioning if he's on Don't Worry Baby. Because of that transitionary period around that time, he may have been on the session, but no one really knows. Al was definitely a full-fledged member of the band at this point. A full-fledged member, I should say. So he's definitely on a lot of this thing, actually all of it really, but Yeah, they started the year by going to Australia and New Zealand, and I had a show in Hawaii supporting Roy Orbison. And at this point, Murray was just on top of them because he found out about how much they were trying to like get as many girls as they could and like just screwing around, drinking, cussing, just being teenagers really. But Murray had this thing where he was like, "Look, if you're gonna swear, if you're gonna drink, if you're gonna screw around with girls, I'm gonna fine you $1,000." So like, not just $100 like it had been before, $1,000 fine. Insane. So he would camp out in their hallway in front of their hotel room, waiting for groupies, girls to come upstairs, and he'd shoo them off, and then watch the Beach Boys' doors, make sure no one's coming out. And they'll kind of realize at the end of that small tour, they were like, "Look, this can't happen anymore. He's out. We can't do this anymore." Which eventually did happen when they started doing "I Get Around." And Brian kind of blew up on him, but a few months later. So yeah, this album definitely I feel is overlooked for the most part in their discography. It's got some absolute smash classics on it, but overall, there's a lot of filler on this thing. And not to say it's not bad filler, but for what was to come, this doesn't stand up as like one of their strongest efforts, even though it's got some of the most amazing songs they ever did. So it's very polarizing because you've got instant classics like "Don't Worry Baby," but then you've got like "Louie Louie," and it's like, ugh, come on, man, like, why couldn't you guys have put like your cover of "Johnny Be Good" on here, or that cover of "What I'd Say"? Like they were doing that one at that point, which didn't get released till like 1981 on an Australian Capitol Records rarities thing. They did it for some radio show or something, but anyway, so this thing really is, poorly positioned in the period of like, it came out during Beatlemania when the Beatles were really taking off, and Brian had this thing come out, and it didn't show off what the Beach Boys were capable of or what he was capable of. And so he was like, you know what, the next album we're going to blow it out of the water, and that's where All Summer Long came from, and that thing's an absolute amazing album. But yeah, this album opens up with Fun, 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 which was based off a true story where Denny had met a girl, and she borrowed her dad's T-Bird, said she was going to the library, but went to meet up with Denny instead. And the Beach Boys thought, oh, well, Mike and Brian thought, that's a cool idea for a song. We can do something with that. And they wrote Fun, Fun, Fun. It's an absolute amazing song. I mean, this is like one of the most recognizable Beach Boys classics of all time. If you buy Beach Boys Greatest Hits, this song is on it. If it's not a Beach Boys Greatest Hits. It covers it all. It's got beautiful harmonies. It's got a rockin', pounding rhythm section, ripping guitar solos, an organ solo, Brian's classic falsetto at the end. It's just a joyful, youthful spark of, being a teenager and screwing around, teenage rebellion kind of stuff, but in a fairly innocent way. I mean, it's just a charged up romp that doesn't let up the entire time. It's a fantastic opener. They used to open with that song pretty often, but they've been closing with it a lot over the last millennia. It's a fantastic song. It charges through the whole way, and the version that's on Beach Boys in Concert, or Beach Boys, what the hell is it called? The one from 1973. I get those two mixed up all the time. That version's fantastic, but this one here is just absolutely amazing. Just the way they pound through it, and they really encapsulate what it's like being young. Very cool song. And then you get "Don't Worry Baby." Holy moly, here's a 1-2 punch for you. Fun, 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 followed by "Don't Worry Baby." Obviously inspired by "Be My Baby." Brian was really getting into his Phil Spector vibe at this point. Stunning vocal arrangement, just glistening chords all over this thing. Really reflective, moody chords. The amount of vocal layering here is staggering. It's just a dense, rich production that is timeless. I mean, the echo on this thing, the pacing, the timing, on top of their game, vocal harmonies, the whole thing is brilliant. And the guitar solo, if you want to call it that, where it's just, little bits of striking the guitar, is so effective because there really isn't much of a guitar presence on this thing, but to have those little bits stick out during the middle part, extremely effective. But it just captures young love again, and that's kind of what the Beach Boys are known for, is that, growing up, figuring yourself out, figuring out, where your heart is, and, liking people. This thing really captures that really well. It's an absolute amazing song. I mean, there's really not much more to say about it, because if you've heard it, you know how great it is. In the parking lot. I love the solo on this one a lot. This one for me, I feel like is another forgotten song by the guys because not only does it have a different beginning and a different ending compared to what's in the middle, for being a really short song, there's a lot of changes that happen. And in particular, having that beginning and ending be totally different from the rest of the song creates a whole different tone and vibe to what a short song could be, what you can do in that amount of time. Um, I really think it's a really youthful, contagious energy kind of song. Have the line "making out." I think it's funny having that in there. But yeah, fun song. Cool track. Then you got Cash's Love versus Sunny Wilson. That's just them goofing around, having a good time. It's filler, of course, but it's kind of fun. Al introduces the fight per se, and Brian's making fun of Mike's voice, and Mike's making fun of Brian's voice, like Mickey Mouse with a cold. That classic line. And then they like play bits and pieces of some of their songs, so it's kind of fun. But it's one of those things where it's like, man, like this could have been an actual song here. Warmth of the Sun, bam, another instant classic. Like you get something like that filler bit to Warmth of the Sun, like holy crap. It was written after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. It's not about him, but there's a reflective mood that was sort of inspired by that situation that led them to writing a really reflective song about heartbreak, and how sad your heart can feel after a situation. So, lyrically and musically, if the two were separate, they'd still both be beautiful pieces of artwork. The music of this one alone is absolutely stunning. I mean, the way this thing builds up, and the some of the accented materials that they are accented, not materials, instruments that they use, like little tiny cymbal splashes, slow pick guitars, and of course the soaring vocals on top of it. This is a song construction that they really hadn't done a ton of before. Maybe a little bit with like stuff on Surfer Girl, but just an amazingly constructed song. The minor and major switches that they play with, the major chords and minor chords that they mess with, are extremely effective because it takes you on a not like a roller coaster, but like a kind of a slow kiddie roller coaster where it's like it's up and down, as you might feel during a heartbreak, and you kind of have these back and forth emotions. So, if there were no lyrics on this thing, it would still be equally as moving and powerful as it is with the lyrics on top of it. Brian's falsetto on this thing is pure magic. It's an undeniably classic Beach Boys song. Then you get This Car of Mine, which kind of like, here's a car song, but it's a Denny classic. It's definitely a short song. It's got some cool bits to it. It bounces along. Denny does a great vocal on this thing. It's not the most amazing song on the album, but it sticks in your head. And this song for me always brings me back to when I was a kid from the Do It Again cassette tape, because that's where I first heard it, was on that thing. Side 2 opens with Why Do Fools Fall in Love, which absolutely amazing song. This was also the B-side of Fun, Fun, Fun. One of the first sessions they had for this album. Recorded the first day of 1964. They started working on this song. Excellent cover, brilliant production, top-notch musicianship. I mean, the Wrecking Crew people are on this one, of course. It just shines, it rocks, it stays faithful to the original, but makes it sound like the Beach Boys are doing it. Absolutely amazing song, and the finger cymbals on this thing, the rollicking drums, the real big 50s vibe that this thing has, but making it sound current at the time is really effective. So, really dig this one a lot. Years later, there was an uncovered version of this thing that came out in Summer Love Songs with the original introduction, which was nice, but this one doesn't have that. Pom Pom Playgirl, which for years I thought was Al singing this song. I could have sworn it was Al. And I found out recently it was Carl. I was like, wow, I would never realize that was Carl. This song is very peculiar because it has a weird bendy vibe to it. It doesn't sound expected. Like when it comes on, it kind of takes this like weird down turn in the vocal harmonies. They kind of play around with different structures they don't normally play with, and it works because it's so weird. It's a good song. It's not one of their best, but it's definitely a unique track. And I can't tell if the vocal harmonies are sad or trippy or... I can't tell. It's a bizarre song. I want to know your thoughts on this one because this is kind of a weird song for them. The solo was a classic surf rock solo. I dig that a lot. But but there's like a lot of dense song construction again for this thing. This song might be over my head by how much it's constructed. But I do enjoy it. It's not one of my favorite things they ever did, but it's definitely like a weird song for them. Let me know what you guys think about that track. And Keep an Eye on Summer, absolute classic. I mean, you can't go wrong with this one. It's about nostalgia, it's about looking back, it's about longing, it's about love. I mean, it's everything you want in a Beach Boys track. You know, it's very Four Freshmen-like in the bridge. It has a very graduation day sort of element to it. So, nice to see Brian use those influences again on that one too. And the last 3 songs on here are definitely filler. And Brian even said that himself. He was like, look, the pacing of the album takes a dip at the end of the record. And it doesn't really go anywhere. And it really is just kind of padding, just to make an album to sell something. So, Shutdown 2, Part 2 is instrumental filler song. Just them kind of goofing around. You know, it's definitely of the time where it's got like a really good sax solo. Probably played by Mike. And it's there's not much to say about it. It kind of follows your traditional 4-bar kind of thing. Doesn't really break any new ground, but it's kind of there for a namesake, I guess, for the album. Louie Louie, it is what it is. It's not one of my favorite songs anyway, but to hear them doing it, it's kind of cool. There's moments of it that are pretty fun, but overall, not my favorite thing on here. And then Denny's drums. This is actually kind of cool. So this is one I will stand up and defend because, one, being a drummer, I like drums. But to hear him isolated is kind of fun because there's moments where you hear his sticks click. There's moments where you can hear his rhythm change as he's doing different fills. So it's very human. It's not perfect, which I love. You know, there's bits. That's sort of the great thing about music. When you listen to like Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin, that solo part where Jimmy Page is doing his own thing, you can hear him start and stop in different parts where he's kind of slipping a little bit. That's what makes a song brilliant and perfect. When you have a human element to it, that's what makes it fun. That's what Denny's drums is. You know, it's just a little bit of him goofing around, but it really is cool to hear it. And I like the production on it. The little bit of echo there kind of makes the drums sound really full and rich. So that's really cool. And then the album's over, and that's it. You know, it really is an interesting bit of early 1964 Beach Boys. Here you go. But to market this thing as a car album, you know, really, it was just a marketing thing, because that's what they were known for, was surf songs and car songs. And, you know, the paragraph on the back of these albums in the 60s, it's like, I don't know who the copywriters were back then, but, like, it was like they had never heard of, like, a group of vocalists before, or never knew, like, what it was like to write about a car. You know, it's just, there's so many weird things on here. There was, where was it? There was a particular weirdly worded sentence on here. Oh yeah, they're all sung in the wonderful way out. I can't even read it. They're all sung in the wonderful way out way that has made the Beach Boys top men in the surfing as well as the road and track fields. Pull up a bucket seat and aim an ear at the Beach Boys and shut down Volume 2. Apparently you're going to go shut down Volume 2. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, there's the other LPs you can buy at the time. This was their 5th one, and they threw that Shutdown album back there too. This is a mono copy. I don't have the original inner sleeve, sadly, but the record's in really nice shape. You know, the old school rainbow label that we've all come to love over the years. And side 2. Really clean album. I got this a couple years ago. The jacket is really nice. But that's it. You know, it's not my favorite album by them, but it's a hard thing to judge because, like, there's so many classics on this thing, but there's also so much filler. So it's like, how do you balance that? You can't give something like this a 5 or a 6 just because you've got Cash's Love versus Sonny Wilson, and then Shutdown Part 2, and then Louie Louie. The negative parts of this album, I don't think can detract from the positive parts of this album because you've got so much heavy classic material. So I'd probably give this thing a 7 or an 8 solely because of the hits on this thing. You know, Brian was on top of his game. He was on top of his game. And those songs stand up for the rest of the album. These songs are worth the price of admission alone just for those heavy hitters. So with that, I do like the cover a lot. I think the album cover is pretty darn cool. So yeah, Brian's doing his Beatles haircut at this point, pushing his hair down. But Yeah, I'd give this thing. Look at that, 500 car songs, Beach Boys vocal group. That's interesting. It's 7 or 8 out of 10 for this one. Because the lacking parts are certainly lacking, but man, the heavy parts are absolute smashes. So 7 or 8. My name is Giggens. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Beach Boys Shutdown Volume 2, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Continue to be awesome, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.